Hindsight bias, the concept of saying, I knew it all along. We talked about it the other day for times when hindsight bias makes us criticize those events that turned out badly. But what about those that turned out well? This is Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Thanks for making Locked On MLB your first listen, as we're available for free on all your podcasting platforms. Make your second listen be Locked On Bets with your boy Q and expert analysis from Lee Sterling. Today's episode is being dropped on the 29th day of December, 2021. You can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on both Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter. Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. So on our previous podcast, let me adjust myself. Those of you who watch me on YouTube, we talked a little bit about hindsight bias. For those of you who didn't hear that particular episode, the Britannica.com defines hindsight bias as the tendency upon learning an outcome of an event, such as an experiment, a sporting event, a military decision, or an election, to overestimates one's ability to have foreseen the outcome. It is colloquially known as the I knew it all along phenomenon. Monday morning quarterbacking is another way we look at it here in the United States. And I talked about moments in terms of trades. Obviously, this team made a terrible trade, trading away Tom Seaver, trading away Nolan Ryan, trading away Frank Robinson, trading away Babe Ruth, Randy Johnson, John Smoltz. Countless examples where the I told you so phenomenon kicks in. But as I mentioned, there have been instances where some of those trades, which are now universally looked upon as horrible, were actually originally looked upon as pretty good. The greatest example, of course, is the Tigers acquiring Doyle Alexander, who picked him up and carried him across the finish line to win the 1987 American League Division, of which everyone was rejoicing when that trade was made, that they won the division, picking up an ace pitcher, and all it cost him was a minor leaguer who wasn't even on the roster, John Smoltz. So our perception of some of these trades can, of course, change over years. And we've been focusing, at least on the last episode, on deals and signings and everything that made the team look bad in retrospect. But they had their merits when they were made. I'm going to go down a different path today. I'm going to look at decisions that were made in the big game. And these are decisions that were made by teams in the postseason, the playoffs, and the World Series down the stretch. And we always focus on moves that a manager made or a team made or whatever that bit the team in the butt, that the team just imploded and this decision was made or that decision was made. And, oh, how could they have made that decision? Well, I mean, so many times when we look back at playoff disasters, very seldom when we look at an all-time great playoff game, can we look up and say, well, look at every manager made the right decision. It just turned out in a certain way. And, you know, there tends to be a GOAT. There tends to be someone who made a poor decision. And boys are, I knew it all along. Hindsight bias comes out big time in that. And most of the time in baseball, it revolves around pitching. How do you handle the pitching staff? This is one thing that I think makes baseball unique. And that is when you have one pitcher or one bullpen that is working, it completely changes the tenor of the game and who's going to win what. You know, you could have a pitcher playing for a bad team, but if your top pitcher is on the mound, suddenly the bad team becomes the favored club. How many horrible teams did Felix Hernandez pitch for during his time with the Seattle Mariners? And yet every time Hernandez was on the mound, whether the Mariners were a 90-win team or a 90-loss team, the Mariners were suddenly the team that you look at, oh, they're probably going to win that game. Steve Carlton won 27 games for a Phillies team that lost 100 in 1972. Every time Steve Carlton was on the mound, the Phillies were the team that beat. They were the team that would be favored. So because of that, the handling of a pitching staff, especially in a big game, is overly scrutinized. And one of my favorite things about hindsight bias in terms of looking at postseason decisions, especially when it comes to pitchers and the managers handling the pitching staff, is how many times supposedly contrary attitudes can kick in. Buck Showalter was just hired by the New York Mets. It's a fabulous hire for the New York Mets. But the first thing so many people brought up was the fact that he did not bring in Zach Britton in that key playoff game against the Toronto Blue Jays in 2016 that cost the Baltimore Orioles a chance to win the wild card. Someone else may have brought up the fact that he did not bring in John Wetland to finish off the Yankees against the Mariners in that amazing series in 1995. Those decisions of not bringing in your closer in that key moment came back and still, to this day, will haunt Buck Showalter until he is the manager of a World Series champion. But let's flip it the other side. Mike Hargrove will never hear the end of it for bringing in Jose Mesa, who had been stumbling in the 1997 postseason to finish up the Game 7 of that year's World Series against the Marlins. Why didn't he just leave in Brian Anderson to finish off the game? Well, he brought in Jose Mesa, who had been his closer all year long. And boom, it imploded in the ninth inning rally by the Marlins. Same thing with Jim Fregosi, who handed the ball to Mitch Williams all year long. And yes, he was blew 3 saves in that year's postseason, but he handed the ball back to him and he surrendered the home run to Joe Carter. What were you thinking? And then another Phillies manager, Charlie Manuel, keep handing the ball back to Brad Lidge, may have cost the Phillies the 2009 World Series. Why are you bringing in your closer? But why didn't Freddie Gonzalez bring in the closer for bring in Craig Kimbrell in the 2013? These managers get killed when they do bring in their closer or when they don't bring in their closer. Conversely, why did you take out that starting pitcher? Why did you take out Blake Snell? He was throwing a masterpiece. Why did you take him out of the game? Kevin Cash. Why did Gene Mauch take out Mike Witt, who was dominating the Red Sox? He got it down to 2 outs in the 9th inning, still with the lead. Yeah, the lead had been cut down to 5-4, but he was going to be the series MVP. All he needed was one more out. Why did you take out Mike Witt? What were you thinking? What was Hinch thinking by taking out Zach Greinke in Game 7 of the World Series in 2019 and not bringing in Garrett Cole, who was warming up? What were you thinking? Flip it. What was Grady Little thinking, leaving Pedro Martinez in the game in Game 7 of the ALCS in 2003? And later, why did Terry Collins bring out Harvey to pitch the 9th inning? What was he thinking? Well, do you know what? If he didn't bring out Harvey and they brought in Familia and Familia blew another save, why didn't you leave Harvey in? It almost always boils down to that. The hindsight bias is through the roof when it comes down to pitching changes in the postseason. And yet, it always seems so easy from where we were sitting. Sometimes the moves are screamed at while it happens. I tweeted out when Snell was removed in Game 6 of the World Series in 2020, Congratulations, Dodgers, for winning the World Series. Now, the interesting thing is, however, that time it blew up in Tampa Bay's face and ultimately cost them the World Series. The night before, I don't know if you remember this, the Dodgers and manager Dave Roberts had Clayton Kershaw dealing. He was pitching wonderfully. He also pulled his starting pitcher in the 6th inning. I thought that was insane. Kershaw, who pitched wonderfully in the first game of that World Series, was pitching wonderfully in his second start in the World Series, was making a case to be the World Series MVP. Why wouldn't you let your all-time great pitcher finish out that game? But it didn't burn Dave Roberts. The Dodgers held on. And so that decision was probably totally forgotten by you. That was a decision that wound up working in the favor of Dave Roberts. But we remember Kevin Cash pulling his starter, saying, oh, it's got to hang on him forever. Managers have made decisions, daring decisions, sometimes the kind of decisions that became the reputation of the manager for, oh, look at all the guts that they have for pulling this off. But if it had blown up in their face, we would be screaming, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? Hindsight bias goes both ways. We praise the manager for showing the guts. Oh, what a gutsy move. And they pulled it off. But if it didn't get pulled off, they're an idiot. The balance between genius and being a fool can sometimes be a bounce here or a bounce there, and neither bounce is the responsibility of the manager who made the decision. They sometimes can't control whether or not they're a genius bound for Cooperstown or an idiot who needs to look for a new job. That's how thin that razor is. And that's how powerful our hindsight bias is. And it's the sort of thing that you just sometimes are looking at managers who are essentially making a bet, who are looking to say, what's the best bet for this particular moment? And sometimes the bets win. Sometimes the bets lose. But what you should always realize is consistent is that BetOnline remains your number one spot for all your sports action this season. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, so don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. All right, let's look at a couple of them. I picked 7 moments, and they all revolve around pitching decisions by managers in key games in either the playoffs or the World Series. And these are all moves that either made the manager look brilliant or became the moment where people looked at that pitcher and say, what a warrior, what a warrior. And yet could very easily have blown up in their face and been one of those moments that we look on from this point forward as some of the dumb decisions by a manager in baseball history. Let's take a Hall of Famer. Let's take a Hall of Fame manager in the postseason that essentially cemented his trip to Cooperstown and is looked upon as one of the great managing jobs in the history of the postseason, and that's Tom Lasorda. In 1988, the Dodgers won the National League West, and they had no chance. The Mets were a 100-win team. Lasorda had the Dodgers in the postseason, and basically their only hope to beat the Mets was to have Hershiser win all of his starts, because Hershiser was pitching like he was on a different planet, and hope you steal a game here or there. Well, everything fell apart in the first few games. Hershiser pitched great in game 1, but Jay Howell, his closer, blew the save. It was a disaster, and the Mets won a Hershiser start. There was a rain delay, which allowed him to start Hershiser again. Hershiser again pitched well. Guess what? Jay Howell not only blew the lead, but he was suspended because he had pine tar in his glove. So the whole strategy was to win all the Hershiser games. The Dodgers lost all the Hershiser games and were 1 inning away from falling behind 3-1 to a much better Mets team. Well, Davey Johnson let Dwight Gooden pitch the 9th. Dwight Gooden let up a game-tying home run to Mike Scioscia. Why didn't you bring in your closer? Dodgers rallied back, and Hershiser threw a complete game victory to win Game 7. Okay. But the A's had no chance against the Dodgers had no chance against the A's, especially since Kirk Gibson was hurt and he couldn't play. And they were basically playing a minor league lineup. Well, as it turned out, the Dodgers won with the Kirk Gibson home run, and then Hershiser won his start. But the A's took Game 3 when McGuire homered off of, say it with me, Jay Howell, their absolutely beleaguered closer. Okay, I set everything up that way for a specific reason. Jay Howell had stunk the entire postseason. The blown saves, the suspensions, the letting up walk-off home run, it was a disaster. In Game 4, a game that the Dodgers had to win, otherwise they were going to give all the momentum back to the Oakland A's, even after the Gibson home run, even after the Hershiser start. The Dodgers did indeed take a lead, and they took a lead into the 7th inning. In the 7th inning, in came Jay Howell. Jay Howell, who had been atrocious in the playoffs. Jay Howell, who came into that game with a postseason ERA of 27, with 2 losses, a blown save, and a suspension. Jay Howell came into the game in the 7th inning, despite the fact the Dodgers did have other pitchers in their bullpen. In came Howell, and with a runner in scoring position, he immediately walked Jose Canseco, and then Dave Parker reached on an error. So the bases were loaded against Mark McGuire, the guy who hit a walk-off home run against him just the night before. All right, he got out of the inning with a pop fly. Fine, Lasorda got lucky. He put Jay Howell out there again in the 8th. Got 2 quick outs, but then a single by Ron Hassey put the tying run on, and the go-ahead run at the plate with Walt Weiss. All right, he struck him out. Fine. They went to the bottom of the 9th. So Howell had already pitched an inning and a third. Fine. There's your redemption. He had pitchers like Jesse Orosco, Ricky Horton, and Alejandro Pena, all good, solid major league pitchers in the bullpen, ready to go. Instead, he brought Howell out for the 9th. And he let up a single to Dave Henderson and had to face Canseco and Dave Parker, both guys who could put it into the upper deck if need be. Did he bring in a pitcher to face Canseco? Did he bring in a pitcher to face Parker? No. Now he got Canseco to strike out, and Dave Parker popped up to third, and he got the out. So Jay Howell, after that horrible postseason he was having, pitched 2 1/3 innings. He threw 32 pitches and got the save, and the Dodgers took a 3-1 lead in the series, of which Lasorda gloated like crazy about all the writers who were killing Jay Howell for how ineffective he was. He said, hey, my guy came out and threw 2 1/3 innings to get the save. So now they're up 3-1. Okay. They could throw Hershiser on short rest, or they could have started someone like Tim Leary or someone like that and allow Hershiser to go on full rest, because Hershiser was drawn out like crazy. Not only has he thrown complete games, through 2 complete games in the postseason, went deep in the other games and came out to get a save in another game. He was gassed. And after throwing all those innings he threw, you might want to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't throw him on short rest, especially with a 3-1 lead. But Lasorda started him anyway. And Hershiser, while he was a little shaky in the early innings, settled down through a complete game victory. And Lasorda was lauded for not giving up on his closer, and Hershiser throwing the 2 complete game victories to clinch it. Okay, great, fantastic. Everything's peachy. Lasorda's a genius. What would have happened if, as everyone expected, Howell, who pitched 2 1/3 innings, which closers barely did then, they certainly don't do now, if he had let up a home run to Canseco, a walk-off home run again, or if he had blown another save, Lasorda would have been crucified. And what if, and this has happened, a star pitcher just sort of runs out of gas? All those complete games eventually catch up to him. They lose the Hershiser start, and suddenly they don't have Hershiser to start in game 6 or 7, or they have to throw him on extraordinarily short rest. The hindsight bias showed that was Lasorda's greatest moment as a manager, that he managed to outfox La Russa and win that World Series with a razor-thin pitching staff. But that being said, those 2 decisions could have cost the Dodgers the championship, made the Kirk Gibson home run a footnote, or kind of like the Rajai Davis home run or the Albert Pujols home run off of Brad Lidge as those great moments for teams that went on to lose the series. He almost handed the series back to the A's. He didn't. He didn't, because in the end, Howell very unlikely did his job. But we praise Lasorda using tons of hindsight bias, which brings us to another super ace who came out to pitch in a situation you're not expecting, and that was Bruce Bochy, who's going to be going to the Hall of Fame, no doubt, and using Madison Bumgarner on short rest early in Game 7 of the 2014 World Series. Bumgarner threw the complete game to win the wild card. He actually lost the game in the division series, but was the MVP of the league championship series against St. Louis, threw a complete game victory in the World Series, got another victory in the World Series, was brilliant, and was available to pitch for maybe a couple of innings in Game 7. But instead, he came in the 4th. He came in the 4th inning and went and pitched 5 innings of shutout ball, of which nearly was unraveled by a poor play in center field by Gregor Blanco. But still, it's looked upon as one of the biggest badass performances, and made Bumgarner's performance in 2014 postseason, I think, one of the greatest in the history of the postseason. And that's not hyperbole when you consider the fact he had 4 rounds that he had to dominate in, and came out to pitch the final 5 innings and throw shutout on the road in a 1-run game. But by bringing him in the 4th inning when he did, was banking that he wasn't going to run out of gas. Bumgarner threw a ton of innings in the regular season, ton of innings that postseason. Eventually, pitchers run out of gas. And if he had used that bullet early on, too early, and the Bumgarner effect was gone, then he had to turn back to the rest of his staff, he would have been in trouble. Affeldt had already pitched as well in that game. So where would he have gone? Would he have gone with Casilla? Would he have gone with Sergio Romo? Would he have gone with, Jake Peavy? I mean, what would have happened? And you would have looked back and said, he brought in Bumgarner too soon. He panicked. Bochy panicked and cost him the World Series. As it turned out, it didn't cost him the World Series. But we've seen instances where an ace pitcher just by the end was like, no, you've used me too much. Take a look at Corey Kluber in the 2016 Game 7, who had been brilliant in the postseason up until that point. But by Game 7, he didn't have anything left. And the Cubs tagged him. Probably cost the Indians the World Series. But they didn't have anyone else to start, essentially, especially since Carrasco and Salazar couldn't contribute. Again, that probably clinched Bochy's trip to the Hall of Fame. That probably clinched Madison Bumgarner's place in baseball history. Probably got him the Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year. But what if that 5 innings shutout was 4 innings, 1 run, which still would have been amazing, but it would have blown the lead, and we would have remembered, oh yeah, Bumgarner came in to pitch, but eventually they got to the Giants' pen. It's all hindsight bias. Jack Morris is in the Hall of Fame, controversially. Some people think he belongs in, some people don't believe that. I can go either way on it. But the moment that clinched it for him in many people's eyes was the fact in the greatest World Series that played, at least in my lifetime, was the 1991 World Series between the Minnesota Twins and the Atlanta Braves. And the finale was a locking of antlers between young John Smoltz and the veteran Jack Morris. And Morris pitched 9 innings, but it went into extras, 0-0. Can't ask for more than 9 innings of shutout ball in Game 7 of the World Series. And Jack Morris, being a macho dude that he is, told manager Tom Kelly, I don't want to be taken out. Well, what pitcher wants to be taken out? That's the big argument about, Grady Little asking Pedro Martinez, do you want to be taken out of the game? What do you think? Pedro Martinez is going to say, yeah, take me out. I don't feel up for it. No, it's your job. Take the ball. We got a bullpen. Go. Tom Kelly basically said to Jack Morris, okay, you gave me 9 innings of shutout ball in Game 7 of the World Series. I think you did your job. Jack Morris convinced him to have him come out and pitch the 10th, of which apparently Tom Kelly said, oh, what's the difference? It's just a game. Jack Morris came out, pitched that 10th, got a 1-2-3 inning, and the Twins rallied for a single run in the bottom of the 9th to win the World Series 4-3 on a 1-0 victory in 10 innings. Well, again, he was going up against a good, solid Braves team, and 10 innings, 1 run is still an extraordinary outing. But if he had done that, that would have cost the Twins the World Series. Or what if he just ran out? He just said, I'm done. I'm toast. He threw a tremendous number of innings in that World Series, and he just threw 9, and he just didn't have anything left. Or what if he still had something left and someone still got a hold of one? That would have been looked upon as, what the hell was Tom Kelly thinking, putting Jack Morris out there for a 10th inning? But alas, we don't say that. We don't say that to Tom Kelly. We don't say that to Tommy Lasorda. We don't say that to Bruce Bochy, because it worked out. Because they were on the razor thin boundary between genius and idiot. And it happened to go their way. And they deserve to be rewarded for that. And quite frankly, I can't think of any bigger reward than a Built Bar. Look, it's the new year, or it's going to be. So that means New Year's resolution. If yours is getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bar makes it easy to stick to your resolution because it tastes good. You'll want to eat it, unlike so many other protein bars that can be chalky, waxy, or taste like a chemical pill. You want to eat healthy, but it just gets so boring. By like week 3, you're thinking, this is not worth it. Where's the chocolate? Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 4 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar that usually has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Here's a new idea for the new year. Go to all your secret treat stashes at home, in the pantry, in the office, in the car, wherever. Throw out all the sugary, calorie-filled treats and replace them with Built Bars. When you're craving a snack or a treat, you can reach for something healthy and tastes incredible. Even if you're not a huge fan of working out, you can at least eat something that tastes good and is good for you. That way you can enjoy a delicious Built Bar. You can almost count it as a workout. There's so many flavors to choose from: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie. My personal favorite is raspberry, and many more. Built Bar is always coming up with new limited time flavors. So check out Built.com and see what's new. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, we're back here talking about cases of hindsight bias, of when it worked out. And managers look brilliant in the process when it could very easily have made a manager look foolish. I can remember there was one time I was calling a manager foolish for a decision that he made. During the 2003 World Series, the Marlins stunningly took a 3-2 lead against the New York Yankees. And they had Josh Beckett, who was their ace caliber pitcher, who was ready to pitch a Game 7 if need be. Jack McKeon threw him on short rest in Game 6, and I thought he was shooting himself in the foot. Why are you going to throw him on short rest where you're not sure how well he's going to do when he's pitched so well on regular rest. And I thought he made a short-sighted decision that was going to cost him the World Series. Well, as it turned out, Josh Beckett was fine on 3 days rest. He threw a complete game shutout, made the final out unassisted when he picked up a ground ball, touched Jorge Posada. He went the distance and was the one celebrating on the, actually not on the mound, on the foul area by the first base at Yankee Stadium. Jack McKeon looked like a genius, saying like, look it, we're not going to give the Yankees another start. I'm going to use my best bullet right now. But sometimes using your best bullet ahead of schedule bites you in the butt. Yogi Berra got killed for starting Tom Seaver in Game 6 of the World Series in 1973 when the Mets were up 3-2, instead of having him start on his regular day rest in Game 7. Well, that's what happened. He lost Game 6, and the Mets wound up losing Game 7. If he had Seaver ready for Game 7, the Mets may have won the World Series that year. Jack McKeon essentially made the exact same decision, and it worked for McKeon. It didn't work for Berra. Now, Berra's in the Hall of Fame, but you understand what I'm saying. Now, Berra's teammate and a man that he was on the coaching staff for was Billy Martin. And Billy Martin was certainly one to make all sorts of crazy managerial decisions. I'm working on a book about the 1972 postseason right now. I've talked about it a few times. He was the manager of the Tigers that year and made a ton of decisions in that year's postseason that some of them blew up in his face and some of them turned out to be works of genius. And he was, let's just be kind and call Billy Martin a slightly unorthodox manager. In 1977, the Yankees were in the American League Championship Series, back when it was a best-of-5 series, against the Kansas City Royals. It was a hard-fought series, not to be confused with the year before, which also went the distance, a hard-fought series. The Royals were up 2-1, looking to clinch the pennant against the Yankees and get revenge for the Chris Chambliss home run. Well, the Yankees fell behind early, had to make a pitching change in Game 4, and Billy Martin brought in Sparky Lyle. Sparky Lyle won the Cy Young Award that year. He was a relief pitcher, a relief ace for the Yankees, who threw more relief innings than any relief pitcher in history at that point, and was a workhorse out of the pen. But someone you bring in late in the game. He brought in Sparky Lyle in where I'm doing some of this off of memory, in the 3rd or 4th inning, and had him go the rest of the way. He had his bullpen closer throwing 4 or 5 innings in a must-win game. Now, as it turned out, it worked, and they got to the Game 5. But they still need to use Lyle in Game 5. As it turned out, he got through Game 5, but he also made a very interesting decision in Game 5. Paul Splittorff was the pitcher for the Kansas City Royals. Paul Splittorff was left-handed. One of the batters he frequently dominated was Reggie Jackson, who was not exactly the best friend of Billy Martin. And Billy Martin kept clashing famously with Reggie Jackson all season long, getting into a fist fight with him in the dugout of Fenway Park in a nationally televised game. Game 5 of the ALCS, all the marbles at stake, and a trip to the World Series on the line, Billy Martin benched Reggie Jackson. Now, eventually, the Royals brought in a right-handed pitcher, and Reggie Jackson came up as a pinch hitter and got a key RBI hit. So all of a sudden, Billy Martin's a genius. Mike Torres came out of the bullpen for a big chunk, but he had to turn to Sparky Lyle in the bottom of the 9th inning after the Yankees, who were 3 outs away from being eliminated, rallied to take the lead. He had to rely on Lyle, who had thrown 5 innings the night before. Lyle got the final outs. The Yankees went on to win the World Series. Billy Martin looked like a genius. But can you imagine if Lyle was completely zonked after the huge game he had to throw in Game 4, was either unavailable for Game 5 or came in and was gassed, as you would think he would be? Or if they didn't rally, said you didn't start Reggie Jackson and you didn't have Sparky Lyle anymore, how would Billy Martin have looked? The answer is pretty bad, but it worked out. It worked out. Other instances, Earlier this week, we were talking about Game 5 of the 2004 ALCS, a game which Tim Wakefield was on the mound inning after inning after inning. And Jason Varitek started pass ball after pass ball after pass ball. Now, I raked Joe Torre over the coals for not running any of their their runners when Wakefield was throwing all these pass balls. But the fact of the matter is, they were one pass ball away from saying, what was Francona thinking, putting Wakefield out there for as long as he did with a catcher who couldn't catch any of his pitches? What was he doing, letting, like, Mike Myers faced only one batter? Why couldn't he have gone an inning or two instead of relying on Wakefield? It just didn't work out that way. Sometimes the decisions make a manager look super smart. In the 2002 postseason, Mike Scioscia had the Angels in the postseason for the first time since 1986. There had been some injuries in their pitching staff, and he brought up Francisco Rodriguez, who had only he threw under 10 innings the entire season. Most of the time he was in the minor leagues. And it looked like he was in there to kind of fill out the roster. As it turned out, Scioscia kept putting him into high pressure points of the division series against the heavily favored New York Yankees, in the American League Championship Series against the tough Minnesota Twins team, and moment after moment against the San Francisco Giants in the World Series. As it turned out, for the most part, Rodriguez dominated everyone he faced, partly because Rodriguez is a talented pitcher and nobody had a scouting report on him. He was a brand new pitcher to almost everybody. But Scioscia kept leaning on him in some of the key moments to set up Troy Percival. As it turned out, the Angels' dominant bullpen made up for the fact that they didn't really have a key ace in their staff. Jared Washburn had a fine season. John Lackey was okay, but there was no dominating ace on that Angels team. They had to lean on their bullpen left and right. And with all the veterans and some other pitchers on the team, and Percival was a fine closer, but it was Rodriguez, a pitcher who had nobody seen, thrown into the fire, was what got the Angels to heaven. Now, it doesn't take a wild stretch of the imagination to see a scenario where the Angels are putting out a pitcher with virtually no big league experience and seeing that pitcher get absolutely thumped by quality bats from the Yankees, Twins, and Giants. It didn't work out that way. Scioscia looked like a genius. So these are all managerial decisions that made the managers look incredibly smart because they worked out. But my, oh my, could they have faltered? My, oh my, was the specter of disaster just sitting right there. It didn't turn out that way. And all these managers, every one of them, Lasorda, Kelly, Bochy, Billy Martin, Jack McKeon, Terry Francona, and Mike Scioscia, all went on to win the World Series in the years that I'm mentioning and lauded as these great managers, and got so close to being the Grady Little, to being the John McNamara, to being the Jim Fregosi, for being the Buck Showalter. Again, a fine manager who a couple of times decisions he made backfired on him and came back to haunt him. Same thing for Dusty Baker. A few decisions here or there, a ball landing here or there, he could have taken multiple teams to the World Series and won, instead of now have taken multiple World Series and have lost. Think about how close Grady Little came to become one of the great figures in the history of Boston sports. Instead, it didn't happen. How close some of these managers I brought up could have led their teams to the promised land. Terry Collins could have been a beloved Mets manager if a few things bounced here or there, but they didn't. And that's how, I guess, fragile reality is. And the reality is I'm going to keep doing these podcasts all throughout the lockout, all throughout the off season. So thanks for making Locked On MLB your first listen. as we're available on all your podcasting platforms. Have your second listen be Locked On Bets with your boy Q and expert analysis from Lee Sterling for all your gambling needs. Talking about hindsight bias and some of the other factors in life. Oh, by the way, I want to make 2 corrections. I said yesterday Ken Griffey Jr. was on the Big Red Machine. Obviously, I meant Ken Griffey Sr. And at one point, I said confirmation bias and not hindsight bias. Okay, I do listen. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but I'm still going to come back and do another podcast. This has been Locked On MLB for the 29th day of December 2021. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.